Hello everyone, my name is Dan, and if you watch the Great British Bake Off, you may just recognise me from season 9, where I was awarded Star Baker in Dessert Week. And I love to bake. Baking is my favourite thing, and today I'm going to show you guys how to make the most amazing melting snowman cookies. I want to show these to you now. Look at this. So we've got this guy here. Look, his head is made out of a marshmallow, and there's just some icing on the cookie, and then we've piped some little details for his arms. He's got some chocolate bean buttons going down the front there. I've even put a little nose in for him, which we may be able to show you later. This guy's got a little hat on, little wonky hat. And this guy is my favourite. He's got a little old-fashioned hat on and a scarf. I think he looks very smart. He's a little bit surprised to have melted, isn't he? And the best thing about these is they're actually quite easy to make. So I'm going to show you how, and we're going to start off by making the biscuit. First of all, I have 75 grams of unsalted butter, and this is nice soft butter. This isn't cold from the fridge, this is nice and squidgy. And then I also have 100 grams of caster sugar. And I'm just going to add these two ingredients into the same bowl. And those need some mixing. So if you've got an electric hand whisk or you've got a stand mixer, get mixing those now. So now I've been mixing this for a couple of minutes. You can see that it's a lot paler, it's a lot softer, and that means that there's lots of lovely little air bubbles in it, and that's going to help make our cookies nice and light. So that is ready now, and to that I need to add a splash of vanilla, about a teaspoon, and also 1 whole egg. And then I'm just going to mix it all together until well combined. And then lastly, I'm going to add my dry ingredients. And I've got 175 grams of flour here. And to that, I'm going to add half a teaspoon of baking powder and a pinch of salt, about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So I'll add those now. And I'm just going to use a hand whisk to whisk them in. I'm using home pride flour, so it comes pre-sifted, so I don't need to sift it myself. So I'll just whisk those together, and then I can add them to my wet ingredients here. And that is your cookie dough. It's that simple. Now I'm just going to mix these together carefully with a spoon, and we're just going to mix them until they're just combined. You may notice that our dough is quite sticky, quite soft, and that's going to be quite hard to roll out. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it in some cling film and put it in the fridge for about an hour until it's nice and firm, and then we can easily roll it out and cut out our shapes. Tap it down as best I can into sort of a long rectangle shape. And the reason I'm going to do that is simply because the thinner it is, the quicker it will chill down in the fridge. Right, so I'm off to let this chill in the fridge. Now before we get our cookie dough out of the fridge, we're going to need to turn our ovens on. So get your oven set to 180 Celsius if you don't have a fan oven, and 160 Celsius if you do have a fan oven, and maybe get an adult to help you. Now, we don't have to wait because I made a dough a little bit earlier, so this one is ready to roll out right now. Before we roll out our cookie dough, I want you to first get ready a baking sheet. I've got one here lined with some reusable baking parchment. You can use regular baking paper, you can use a silicone mat if you have one. It's going to be a lot easier to get the biscuits off if the tray is lined with something. So get that ready before you start. And you're also going to need a rolling pin, a little bit of flour, and a round cutter. Now this one is about 8 centimeters in diameter. I wouldn't go any smaller than 8 centimeters. Now before I unwrap my dough, I'm going to throw down some flour on the bench. You can be quite generous with this. We're only going to roll this dough out once, maybe twice, so it doesn't really matter if we use a lot of flour because we're not going to re-roll it, but we really don't want it to stick. Now before I start rolling, I'm going to flour my pin and flour the top of the dough, and this is just going to make sure that my pin doesn't stick to it and pull the dough up as it goes. Now we're going to be rolling this out to somewhere between 3 and 5 millimeters. Now if you don't know what that looks like, a pound coin is about 3mm in thickness. And I'm just going to roll this, I'm going to turn the dough to make sure that I'm rolling it evenly in all directions. Okay, now I'm pretty happy with that. Not too thin, not too thick. And so I'm going to take my cookie cutter and I'm going to punch out some circles. Try and fit as many circles in as you can, so you might have to think carefully about it before you start cutting. You don't just cut in the middle. Right. And as I push down all the way to the table, I give the cutter a bit of a twist from side to side, and that helps cut any bits of dough that are still stuck together. To get my biscuits off the table, you can try and lift them with your hands, or if you've got a palette knife, what I've got here is a hamburger turner, and I love this, is perfect for picking up cookies. So if you have one of these, get this out, or use a palette knife to slide underneath them. Then I can slide underneath it and pick it up and move it straight to my baking sheet. Now, to re-roll my cookie dough, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up all my pieces, and if they're covered in flour, which they are, I'll just try and dust the flour off. Now, I've got my scraps all stuck together. Now, before the dough gets too warm, we're going to quickly roll this out again. I'm going to chuck a bit more flour down, and I'm being mindful, I want to get 3 out of this. So I'm going to sort of, actually, to be honest, if I just roll a circle out of this, I'm sure that will be big enough to get 3 more out of it. And you can keep rolling this dough to get every last cookie out of it, but as you re-roll it and keep rolling it again and again, the dough will get a little bit tough. Right, I think I can get 3 more out of this. Let's see. And there they are. My 12 biscuits. That one slid across. Poke her back. There we go. Right, I need to bake these for just 10 minutes. They need to go into the oven at 180 Celsius or 160 Celsius if you have a fan oven. And they need to go in the oven for just 10 minutes. Now when the biscuits come out of the oven, they'll still be quite soft. So I'm going to leave them on the baking tray for 5 minutes to firm up, and then we can move them onto a wire rack to cool completely. To make the icing, I just need 200 grams of icing sugar and a little bit of water. But first, it's really important that we sift the icing sugar, otherwise your icing is going to be lumpy. You might want to use a spoon to push some of the bigger lumps through. Now that's all nicely sifted, I'm just going to add 2 tablespoons of water. And then I just whisk them together. Now what we're looking for in our icing is for it to completely smooth over within about 15 seconds. I can see from looking at mine it's just a little bit too thick, so I'm going to add a touch more water with just a few drops at a time. So I think my icing is just about ready. What I want you to do is give it a big stir and count how long it takes for it to completely smooth over. Let's see. About 15 seconds, so I think that's going to be perfect. Right, let's get decorating. Take a big spoon of your icing and dollop it on the top of your biscuit. And you can use your spoon to help you spread it up to the edges to make a nice thick puddle all the way around. And then once you've got a nice puddle, take a marshmallow and put it off to one side, and that will be the snowman's head. Now if the marshmallows or icing start to escape off the side of your biscuit, don't panic, it's an easy fix. Push the marshmallow back on, use my finger to wipe some of the icing away, and that's fine. Now if it looks a little bit messy, it's not a big deal. It's a melting snowman, it's supposed to be a bit messy. Now this is the fun part. This is where you get to get really creative and decorate these snowmen in any way that you like. Now I really want to see your guys' ideas. I hope you come up with some fantastic things, but I'm going to show you what I came up with. I decided to buy some icing tubes for writing with. Now you could use some icing in a piping bag for this, but I think it's easier just to buy it from the shop ready-made. And I can use those to draw arms and faces and buttons on the snowman. I also bought these colourful chocolate beans, and I'm going to use these to create the buttons that would have been down the front of the snowman's coat. And how about using some orange sprinkles to make the noses? To make hats for the snowman, you could use some of these jelly sweets, or how about using some giant chocolate buttons and these mini chocolate peanut butter cups. So now this is the really fun part. I'm going to show you some ideas, but I'd love to see what you guys come up with. And the only tip I would give you is when I decorate, it's good to get down to the level of the biscuit. Now the first thing I'm going to do is use some chocolate beans to make the buttons. So there we go, I'll push them down into the icing to look like they've fallen into the snow. There we go, 3 I think. And then I'm going to use a writing tube to draw on a face. And now, lastly, I'm going to draw on some arms. These arms look like sticks that have fallen off. For the next one, I'm going to do buttons like I did before. So I'm going to use a cocktail stick to poke a hole where his nose would be. Oop. And because the marshmallow is nice and sticky, put a sprinkle inside. Now this time, I think I'm going to make my snowman a bit sad, or maybe a bit surprised. I'm going to draw some eyebrows on him too. And lastly, I'm going to give him a little hat. I'm going to use my icing to draw a scarf on this one. Oops. Don't worry if it's a bit wobbly, it just makes it nice and fluffy. Now I'll put a blob of icing on his head, and I can attach a giant chocolate button, and then a little more icing on the head. So I can attach this mini peanut butter cup. And look at that little hat. So there's a few of my ideas, but I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. So have fun making them, take lots of pictures and send them to me because I cannot wait to see them all and pick a winner.
He does have one eye.
That's a nose.
I think you've chewed half his head off.